Yep.
Okay, welcome to this parent meeting. I know that some of you would actually prefer that we did this in Danish, but we have people here who don't understand Danish, so we're doing it in English. And of course, we are an international school, but I also know that you didn't choose international schools, your kids did. But do feel free to ask questions in Danish. I think that's about what we can cover, and then or come and talk to us afterwards if there's anything you would like to know. Some of you are parents to people who were students who were here last year, either in pre-IB or who came later in that school year. Others are new and have not as such been to a parent meeting, but you may have heard these things at, for instance, open school event or at Skipper Clement, where I've also visited, etc. So some of these things will probably sound like repetitions, but our experience is that you will take them in perhaps in a little different way now that your children are actually at the school, actually having a theory of knowledge and all these things, because it becomes sort of more relevant for where you are right now. So that's what we're going to go through. I'll say something, Even will say something, and if you have any questions as we move along, then just stop us and we'll do our utmost to answer them. This is a quote, it's almost 10 years old, or it is 10 years old, Rasmus, and I think that's still one of my favorite quotes. Rasmus talking about being in this international school where you get more than just knowledge as a way of thinking and viewing the world around you, because so many things in the subjects, but also in the interaction between the students actually gives us all of that. Maybe I should turn it on and it works better. But actually we like the word multicultural more than international, because international has so much to do with borders and national confinements, and as we know right now that kind of gives a lot of problems. It's more interesting for us to look at different cultures and exactly where people come from. So we consider ourselves a multicultural school with people from various different cultures. And we had that also in the IB mission statement. Sort of these sets of values that we are to, as a school, with the teachers, with the students, with the rest of the school, etc., to create this learning environment which lives up to certain values. And in these values we have this sentence that it aims to, we have to create this learning environment which aims to develop inquiring, knowledgeable and caring young people. Inquiring and knowledgeable, of course, in terms of their subjects, getting solid knowledge, but also being able to question the knowledge and question where could we go beyond what we are just being presented, and caring that they care about what they learn, but other people as well. Even we'll say a bit more about that when we come to the CAS bit of it. Who helps to create a better and more peaceful world through intercultural understanding and respect. Intercultural being a bit like the multicultural that cultures meet and that they communicate here. And challenges our students so that they become active, compassionate and lifelong learners who understand that other people with their differences can also be right. Lifelong learners, that's one of the key words that we put emphasis on here at this school. Thinking that our job is not just getting them through to the exams that they have in IB2, that's of course pretty important, but it's also that they get skills, for instance research skills from the extended essay and the things that they do, which can take them on to university, but maybe also if they're not studying literature at university, they will get life skills for reading literature or whatever it is that they are engaged in here, that they will take those values with them beyond school. But also understand that other people with their differences can also be right. Important here is the fact that this is can be right. It doesn't say that everyone is right, but we need to find out who is right and or what can be right with different perspectives, and accept that people have different perspectives to enter the world with. We talked about the other day a couple of years ago when We started pre-IB. That was one of the moments in Israeli-Palestinian history where they were fighting and throwing bombs at each other. But in the same classroom, we had a boy from Israel and one from Palestine. So they needed to be in the same classroom. Or we have had students from the Syrian conflict where they were from the two different sides. But when they were here, then they needed to be part of a classroom where we shared something else. But they also, sometimes they would be put in situations where they would be discussing issues that related to situations, political situations, it could also be religious situations, where they would disagree, but giving them sort of an environment here where we can listen to each other's positions and arguments, not necessarily agreeing, but at least listen to this. And that comes very much into the way that we teach the students how to argue, how to present an argument so that you actually put in some evidence for what you say. That's something we work quite a lot with. In IB, you'll get used to this, there are so many abbreviations. IB, just International Baccalaureate, Baccalaureate meaning the same as Danish studentereksamen, Baccalaureate in French. And we had this organization behind us, International Baccalaureate Organization, which is an organization that was formed in 1968, based on the idea that there was a Cold War situation. The world was in many ways similar to some of the situations that we see today. And one of the ways that organization saw it as a good opportunity, a good place to start by fixing the world would be to give children all the way down to kindergarten level solid education and this idea how to learn to argue and see different perspectives in the world. And that's International Baccalaureate Organization, which is a growing organization with around 5,500 schools in 160 countries. When I started writing this presentation 10 years ago, when it was, it was around 3,000 schools. So it's a growing organization that we have. And the International Baccalaureate Diploma Program, where your kids are now, that's sort of the youth education program that they had that leads up to the IB diploma exam. But we have in Denmark, in Norway, Scandinavia, etc., we have also the pre-IB, so that very many of our students, depending on year to year, but approximately sort of in the long run, 80% of our students do IB over 3 years in what they do. Important is also that when you have an IB exam, then it's recognized for further education in Denmark and abroad. That's one of the advantages of having an IB diploma, is that whether you have an IB diploma from Hesselis, from Lulu or Houston, or where you had it, then people know, so you did biology high level, okay, that means this when they enter the university, or you did English language and literature, so that means that we are, of course, allowed to have some individual choices as a school, both in terms of the subjects we offer, but also in terms of the contents of, for instance, the literature course. But on the other hand, we are under very strict quality control. Every 5 years we do a 5-year, very, very detailed 5-year evaluation, and if we don't live up to certain standards, IBO will take away our license to be an IB school. And that goes for all IB schools. I just checked the numbers today, and 173,000 students worldwide got an IB diploma last year. So that is also a number that's growing. I won't say much about this, just also to close that sort of question once and for all. Before 2018, there was a conversion scale of IB grades into Danish grades when they applied for university, which had some unfairnesses. If you Google something about IB diploma and university recognition, make sure that the articles and the comments that you read are from 2018 and beyond that, because if you get some of the old articles, they will say that IB students were discriminated against. And we really, also when we see the graduates from here, we really have no evidence to say that anymore. So there's not really, that concern is not one that we see at the moment. Even,
yeah.
will you tell me a bit about the wonders of...
Release the...
Yes.
Okay, so from the historical and I suppose ideological explanation to something a little bit more practical here. The system we use at our school to communicate with students, and this is also your duty as parents, as long as your kids are under 18, to get the logon details to Lectio. And you can find a link to our Lectio on our website. It's always here at the bottom. You can always click it and it will take you to our Lectio, because this is a system that's used by about 85% of the schools in Denmark for communication. When you log in, I'm not going to bore you with all the details here, but we've created kind of a fake student so that we can see what it looks like. So when you log in, this is the front page that you will see, and just basic features that you need to be aware of are there. And again, sit down with your kids, take a moment so that they'll show you around. Also, they've been doing this, those who are new have been doing this for 5 weeks, the others 6 weeks almost, and the others have been doing it for a whole year, and some of you may be familiar with it already. But most important features is the schedule, everyday schedule. Color code is, you can see that our lessons are from 8:15, and sometimes they run as late as 16:50, but that's a rarity. So most lessons end at 3:15 in the afternoon. If your kids say, I'm off tomorrow morning, you can always check the schedule, that's always good. If they say a lesson is cancelled, it will show red in their schedule. If there are changes, and changes may also entail that they do not have to attend the lesson physically, but do some of the assignments from home. All of this may be explained under the lesson. So just put the cursor on the lesson and even click on it, and then you'll see what they're doing in that particular lesson. So this is a good way to check up on your kids if you feel the need. Of course, respecting their privacy, they're almost grown up, and things like that.
You said good to check, but I understood that my kid must give permission, the same code.
He needs to, if he's under 18, they're obligated to share the code with you. If they're over 18, then all bets are off. Then it's GDPR. And, so if your kid has, birthday on February 4th, February 3rd, it's your right. February 4th, it's their right. So, if you look at attendance, you can keep an eye on their attendance here, have them explain to you how this works. This is also really important. There are two very important columns, the regular physical absence and written absence. And as you can see, this guy has not handed in one single assignment and has missed about 4 out of 54 classes so far. Being a fictional character, that's quite a feat, I think. But these two things are kind of day-to-day changing things that you have to keep an eye on. For long-term planning, you can always go through the weekly schedule, just go by week by week by week if you want to see how the daily schedule looks. If you want to see the whole year, then you can go to this one, Månedskalender. Unfortunately, there is no English feature here. It's only made in Danish, so this company is arrogant enough to assume that everybody can learn the different words. The kids learn the English terms for this in the Danish beginners classes, actually, so that they can navigate the system. This is the calendar where you can see 3 months at a time, and we try to keep it updated. And you can see when all the holidays are and things like that. for the whole school year, so you can go as far as actually as June 23, and you'll be able to see when the last day of school is and when the last exam day is and so on and so forth. So all of this is of course updated. So these are the three main features that you really need to be aware of as a planning tool, as a day-to-day tool. There are a bunch of others. I'm actually not going to bother you with all of them. Last thing that I'm going to show you is this. This is where the grades will be available. So there will be no report card sent home to your kids that you have to sign. We assume that you have a conversation with your child about their grades. The first grades will be available, I think it's in November.
Yeah.
But it will pop up on the front page. All the important information is always available here, so you can see that, okay, so some things are coming up, and they will be in red here, and things like that. Yeah?
I have a question.
Sure.
What if you have two children under 18?
Yeah.
So do I just go through the
They will have separate accounts. So,
do I have to have two apps? Like,
oh, no, well, it's,
or I just log in a different?
yeah, you have to, yeah, it's different login,
Oh.
but it's good that you bring up apps, because we usually say that don't use apps, especially not as parents, use the browser.
Oh, okay.
The apps are not official apps, they have not made any apps. So
Okay.
the apps are add-ons, and some things disappear in the apps, and the functionality is not. If you want the complete thing,
You have
use
to
the
go to
browser.
the computer.
Yeah. But use the browser on your phone as well. It's the same thing.
Right.
So that's. And I've been working with the system for 16 years. I've never used an app.
Okay.
So I use the browser on my phone as well. So it's the most reliable thing.
So I just have to log in.
Yeah, you log out and you log in. You can log out here, and as you can see, I can choose to log in with this account or my own account. I don't know if there are any questions, because I think that you should just take 15 minutes with your kids and let them show your nature. One last thing, stay away from the messages that may be private unless you really want to. And then, if they're saying I don't have any written assignments, this is a shortcut to see what written assignments they actually have, and if they have handed them in. Maybe you can just ask them, do you need any help with your written assignment in, I don't know, math? Yeah. Okay, that's kind of the very short intro to lecture, but ask your kids, they are the experts, also from this side of the screen. Okay?
I may also add to what Ivan is saying about assignments, that later on in the IB program, when they get all these assignments that are part of their exam grade, those we call IA, internal assessment and external assessments, they will also be available there. And if they have an IA, then, and there's a deadline for that the next morning, then maybe that's not meaning that you decide that they should clean up their room, or the weekend before an extended essay is to be handed in. Maybe that's okay that they skip lunch with grandma or whatever, because those that have, they will, when that time comes, they're not in the schedule yet, but there will be a few in spring, but in IB2 there will be plenty of them. That will be useful information for you as families, because it is actually extremely important that they do spend their time on these exam components, and that it is actually problematic for them, because we very, very, very rarely get extensions for these if they have to suddenly go abroad or on holiday 2 days before an exam assignment is handed in. So when they come to IB2 in September, IB2, Ivan will make a schedule and it will be available in Opgave. So that's perhaps the time when it would be a good idea, even though they have turned 18, and say, can I have a look at it so that I don't plan to do anything that will sort of disrupt your education. And just one last thing I was thinking about when Ivan was talking, this thing about turning 18. By Danish law, and we know that for people who come from other international school systems, this does seem a little strange, but by Danish law, when they turn 18, as Ivan said, the door really closes. We're not allowed to talk to you unless they give permission. I have had quite a handful of parents who's called me a week before their kids turned 18 and just asked me, is there anything you think I should know? And then I can tell them. But a week later I can't. So you're more than welcome to do so. I'm also there's both being, I think we even forgot to introduce ourselves, didn't we?
I just assume people know who we are.
No, we don't. Oh, my name is Karen, I'm head of school, but I'm also the student counselor, and that's what I'm talking about right now. As a student counselor of our students here, I have a lot of ongoing work with some of the students where we also take in parents and communicate with parents. And when I see someone else turning 18 in a little while, I will usually ask them, can I continue talking to your parents? And in 90% of the cases, they will say yes, and we write a note in lecture that I had that permission, so that we can continue talking. So if I have an ongoing thing with them, then I will talk to them. But also if they turned 18, and sometimes it is really nice to have parents involved as well. I will also ask them, wouldn't it be a good idea to get them involved? But if they say no, I can't be involved with. Yeah, that was just a little practical thing, because it does sometimes makes people wonder, why didn't I hear anything from school? But that's a law thing.
Seems like we're talking about how you can control your kids in the most efficient way here. That's not exactly the point.
Yes, I have 2 teenagers myself, so. So he doesn't know yet. With all of this. Yeah, that's me. Yeah. We talked just a little bit about it before, but and this is also just going back sort of a little to what is it actually they are doing? They're here now in year 1. For some of them it's the 2nd year, but I think, and maybe some of them who were in pre-IB last year will also have come home and said, this is so different. Even though we try in pre-IB to look like IB and add, sort of give them more work, etc., then it is a different thing to be in the IB program. And one of the reasons, the positive reasons, is actually that even though they all have English, they all have Danish, they all have math, and they all have history, because they have chosen from the IB diploma curriculum here. I think next slide might show. They've chosen these subjects, and so everyone has math one way or another, everyone has a science subject, everyone has English from that group, and then everyone also has Danish either as a first language literature course or as a second language. But just the fact that some of them have the subject on higher level and some of them have them on standard level, and then that they have 2 subjects which they have chosen themselves, actually means that it becomes more personal to them what they are doing, and just that reduction of subjects compared to what they had last year. So we see it so often, and I also see it already now. It's no secret, I think, that one of the pre-IB classes last year, they were very lively when they were not supposed to be lively, and they weren't working as hard as we would like them to work when they were supposed to be working. But what we hear from the teachers now is that we had 2 wonderful TUK groups where they're working, where they're concentrated, and where they're also mixing across what they were in pre-IB and with new students coming in. Which I think has got a little bit to do with this. Now they've taken personal responsibility for the design of their own IB program. I don't think I've heard one negative comment about the group. And as Ivan said, we've been here for almost 6 weeks now, which is quite unusual. So that's really, really positive in terms of what we have. Some of them are still having 4 higher levels because we chose to book them with 4 higher levels. They're supposed to, by the end of, or in November IB2, when we sign them up for exam, only to do 3 higher levels. But we give them, for most of them, it makes sense continuing with 4 higher levels all through IB1 to consider which subject to drop down. But some of them have already been with me, come to me now and said, I want to drop math down or whatever. So that's a gradual process, and the students are very aware of it themselves. I don't have to, I remind them at one point, now it's time to take a look at it, but they are very aware of it themselves. So they know that they need to take one subject down. But no rush, we still have time to investigate all of this. They had their subjects, and then they had these core requirements, and the extended essay is a large written assignment that they write between IB1 spring and hand in around November 1st in IB2. And that's one of the things where I say you as parents can support them, because when they have these extended essay deadlines, we will give them 2 days off from school that are writing days, and then there's a weekend, and then they hand in after that. And that weekend, we expect them to be working. Sometimes we had students who thought that, whoa, 4 days off, we can go to Berlin or something like that, but that's not really the point here. They choose the topics of the subjects of their extended essay and the topics themselves. They can only choose from the subjects that they are taught in the IB diploma here, because there are some methods that they learn in the subject. So maybe they would like to write in computer sciences, which is an IB subject, but since we don't teach it here, there would be methods that they wouldn't know how to apply, because this is a very academic assignment, where we all, IB2 are doing it right now, and in next week we had a visit from Jan Klein, who used to work at Aalborg University with academic writing, and now she has her own creative writing school, and she spends a whole day with the students on academic writing and corrects referencing and all that stuff. So yeah. And then they have theory of knowledge. Maybe you can explain that better even.
Theory of knowledge is a subject that they all have to have. It takes its roots in epistemology, but it's more than that. So I guess it's easier to explain. In the first year, they work with, well, all of this is of course about knowledge, but the first year they spend on working with themselves as knowers and how they relate to knowledge. Then they work with the problems that knowledge entails in an academic way. And then they end up with doing a little exhibition at the end of the first year where they show how knowledge and TOK, theory of knowledge, how it's present in their everyday lives, where they take 3 objects from their lives and connect it to TOK. In the second year, the focus is more on areas of knowledge. Why do we group knowledge the way we do in academic disciplines? So why do we have natural sciences? What methods do we use when we do natural sciences? And the same thing for the arts. What do we do when we concern ourselves with the arts and things like that? So it's a broad subject that ties the different subject-specific things together in a more theoretical framework. And they usually are in a huge panic and don't understand what's going on until the end of year 1. That's kind of the whole idea. And I've taught the subject for many, many years, and the curriculum changes that it's gone through have really, really made more and more sense. So the current program that they're in should give them less confusion and more understanding of why we need to talk about knowledge in general, not just in the specific subjects.
I think it's one of those subjects that they actually remember when they leave IB, where they've had discussions that sort of stays with them.
Yeah, we move in all kinds of different areas. We talk about everything from ethics to very basic things. How do we gain knowledge through our senses? So it's a very broad subject of concern.
And then the last core requirement is CAS, creativity, activity, and service.
And imagine that to pass IB, you're forced to do some work that is essentially voluntary. Through CAS, they work with 7 different learning outcomes. These learning outcomes can be the very simple one. The first one is learning a new skill, and the top ones concern themselves with problems of global concerns or global issues. But all of this is, of course, done through these 3 strands: creativity, activity, and service, and it's all about participating in different projects that they either initiate or just become a part of, and through these experiences they have to develop themselves as creative knowers, for instance, if they want to do voluntary art or dance or participate in the school musical. Or as the one that we do most is the one that's called service, where they participate in projects that help the local community. One of the projects that we have is that they participated at the local KFP, I might have heard about this. The local football club, for instance, help out there. And since there is no physical education in the IB curriculum, they can also do sports as part of their class. As long as they use this to develop their own character in one way or another through these learning outcomes. That's basically the whole point. So that they get to reflect on what have I learned from participating in this, and how have I become basically, and it sounds very lofty, but how have I become a better person by doing this, and what have I learned from actually starting a project and finishing it? Or if I haven't finished, what have I learned from starting a project and not finishing it? So it's a very personal development, and it should happen on a voluntary basis. That means that they can choose any project they like. But again, they have to do it in order to pass. So.
Well, we've seen some very moving examples of teenage boys at the local nursing home doing Christmas decorations with the elderly and stuff like that, where they definitely came out of their comfort zone but had a really great day. And they would never have gone there if it wasn't for CAS. CAS is also one of the things that confuses the students right now. They had an introduction on the welcome trip last week, but it's still one of the, they need to sort of find their own roots in it. They have Jon and Charlotte as their CAS coordinators, and we tried, they have office hours, and so if you hear your kids at home come and say, oh, I don't understand this CAS and whatever, then tell them, go and see your CAS coordinator, because then they will take a more one-on-one talk with them about what possibilities they could have. But they do find it a little confusing at the beginning. They always do. And
also, in turn, for us to make sure as a school, we kind of try to balance. There should be room for the students to find their own things to do. But there is also a whole palette of things that we do tell them to do, because a lot of this is happening at the school or in connection with the school, and we have cooperations with different places in town. So it's a lot of the CAS should just be a question of actually showing up at the right time at the right place, because we've made all the contacts and Charlotte and you're really good at that. So participation and showing up is half the battle already.
But to pass your IB, you must pass CAS and extended essay and theory of knowledge. Theory of knowledge and the extended essay, the grades for that will be done together, and that can give them some extra bonus points. CAS is not graded, and I know the CAS coordinators do not like me for saying this, but I say it out of having seen students who thought CAS was much more fun than doing math. And sometimes they got the balance wrong, got really stressed out about a lot of CAS because they got involved in so many great projects that they didn't have time to do math and English and whatever. And that's a bad strategy, because they are not graded in CAS. They need to pass, and there's of course some minimum requirements for that. But sometimes we do see students getting the balance right, because they find it really interesting, this whole CAS thing.
Perhaps, yeah, in connection with that, they have 18 months to complete their CAS program. So if they've been in pre-IB and they can start already in June in pre-IB. So you can count 18 months ahead, so some of them can finish their CAS as early as January or February in 92, which is ideal. And that's the offer they have. And some of them don't finish until March, of course, or early April, but ideally they should be done with CAS by February 92.
Some important dates. In September, Ivan will introduce this IA. IAs, in IB you get 1 grade in each subject on your final diploma. That 1 grade is consists of a number of different activities you do throughout the 2 years. including these in languages, one oral exam, but also written projects or reports or essays, etc. that you do. We call them IAs meaning internally assessed, but actually most of them are externally assessed by external examiners. But we'll go through what is it actually it is, because that's another of those things that might confuse the student. Well, what is it? What did IA think they are talking about? And when does it happen? The thing about IAs is that you need to have learned quite a bit in your subjects before you can actually start writing them, which means that they are not really to be handed in until in IB2. We have an IA season, as they call them, on all IB schools, where IB2 students are pretty busy handing in these IAs, but they can't do them before that. And likewise, there are simply things we can't tell them yet about IAs, because they don't have the knowledge to understand. Which again, might be a little confusing, especially for those who would like to know everything and have everything under control. So we try to tell them as much as they can understand by now. But the teachers are, of course, in their lesson preparing them constantly, even when the kids don't know it, for these IAs are coming up. They already had one session with Anna, our reading counselor, and they will have one again in November. Well, she'll give tips to everyone about reading strategies, what makes sense, because there are some strategies that will make it easier to open up a biology text, which might be different from the strategies you need for opening up a history test. And they've had one introduction, and we'll sort of keep on working on it. On Friday, they had the sports day here in school. They made teams, different teams for different activities. Like in all these school-sanctioned events, attendance is mandatory. This year there's also a prize for the best team spirit, so it's not just all about sports. Maybe they need to bring a raincoat, I'm afraid, with that weather forecast, but we're crossing fingers. After that, there's a cafe, and we also have cafes at school where the kids hang out with each other for some hours. Alcohol will be, they can buy alcohol at these things, that's still possible in Danish schools, or gymnasiums, very much under debate, but it's not hard liquor that they can buy. And at these cafes, we don't experience much problem with people getting extremely drunk, etc. They're usually hanging out.
I haven't been to one for many years, but that's what I hear.
Yeah. November, time breaks coming up. Also a bit more about grades in a little while. They come up again in January. Again, this is where you see it. In February, we have parent consultations. Parent consultations where you can sign up to meet the 6 teachers that they had in their subjects and have one-on-one conversations with the teacher and you, but also your kids. We don't have, because of their age, we don't have talks with just parents and teachers. Likewise, we don't have talks with teachers and students that night. Then they can talk at other times. But it's really important that the students are there, because it's really about them. So we might be sitting here making all sorts of arrangements for them, but if they don't buy in on it, then what's the point? Yes, that was the extended essay that will be started in April. We had a study trip. Well, you will say more about that in a little while. End of year grades in May. The end of year grades and also the term grades, none of that gets on their final IB diploma, but we use it, of course, as sort of a marker to see how they are doing, if they are doing like they should do. We have a policy here that says that to be promoted from IB1 to IB2, we need to be able to see that they will act sort of a progress that will give us some kind of certainty, or at least a good guidance in terms of saying they will pass their IB diploma. That's both Danish law, but it's definitely also a question of not wasting their lives and their times on an education where they might never finish it because their grades are too poor. Or it might actually also be a good idea to retake IB1 That's something that happens every year in our system and with good success. That people for various reasons in their lives weren't quite ready when they started in IB1, and then it's better to retake IB1. But we actually have quite a lot of success with doing that. And then they get it right the second time round. Instead of going all the way to IB2 and perhaps failing, etc., then it's better to take that extra year in IB1. So we use end of year grades, but also the mock exams, written mock exam period for that. All these dates you can find in månedskalender in Lectio, where you can find them. The schedule in June will look as if they're doing nothing right now. The schedule hasn't been rolled out for the rest of the school year. But when it will be available only to the middle of May, and then not until later will these dates come up. But it doesn't mean that they can just go on a holiday. They are expected to be here until I think the school ends on the 23rd of June, and there will be activities. And again, to get promoted to the next school year, you have to be at the mock exams. Otherwise, yeah. Studievalg is one of those external counselors who comes on a regular basis, Line. Her job is to inform the students about studies after IB. She does Danish studies mostly, and then together Line and I do studies abroad. So they will have their first session with Line sometime this autumn, and then there will be stops on the way where Line will prepare them. But most of the things regarding university application doesn't happen until in IB2. And actually, for Danish universities, where most of our students actually do end up going, deadline is March 15th in IB2, where they don't need teachers' references or anything but their grades. And they don't even have those in the system for that as well. But if they're applying for university abroad, then sort of the summer between IB1 and IB2 is the time to start looking for things. I know quite a bit about universities abroad, but they may change rules all the time, so I can't keep up with the whole world. So it's on your part as parents or on the kids themselves to check whatever specific requirements that university had. In Denmark it's so easy, we have a shared system for the whole thing, but that doesn't have, it doesn't work that way in most other countries. So they need to look at it themselves and what requirements there are, and then I can guide perhaps on the way. But we'll talk loads more about that with the students when the time comes. But it's definitely not something they should stress out about in IB1. That would be a waste of time.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Previous slide. You have time grade in November and also in January.
Yeah.
And what time in January they are supposed to receive the term grade, or is it some exam happen before?
No. Term grades are based on everyday performance. They get one grade in each IB subject, and that grade is based on the written performance that they do, but also their work participation in class. We, even though it might be a written exam in the end, then the everyday basis of participating, we find that very, very valuable, but also essential for actually understanding the knowledge that they're taking in. So they get one grade, and that's the teacher's evaluation of them. Those term grades, again, do not get on the IB diploma. So we always say that a good IB student actually says to his teacher, well, I don't get this, help me. Where in other systems you would perhaps hide that a little because those term grades would get on the exam diploma. But if you're a smart IB student, you tell your teachers in due time that you don't understand it so that they can help you, so you're ready for the exam in the end.
Yeah, and perhaps we should say that grades is just one of the ways that we evaluate our students. All the teachers evaluate them as we go along, and we have to do this. So it's not just grades, but it's also just feedback on their written assignments and their performance in class. And the grades themselves do not necessarily always reflect that. So it's also part of the participation. And this is also a chance to have a chat with the subject teacher in February for the parent-student consultations.
How about like, it's normally every year in time of Christmas, we go on a vacation to our home country.
Mhm.
And then means all these years that my daughter used to take online classes or something like that to keep up the required knowledge. And
We are not by the Danish Ministry of Education, under which we operate, both because they are the ones funding us. So they're also part of how we organize school. They have made it very clear that we are no longer to do online teaching because we no longer are in a corona situation. So we fully understand that sometimes you will have to go, being international families, on a longer vacation. First of all, you need to be aware that all absences count. So if you go away for 2 weeks, okay, fine. In IB2, you need to check månedskalender, because the monthly calendar, because we do have mock exams in December in IB2. But so if you're absent 2 weeks there, then it will be problematic if she breaks late or if she starts skipping Monday mornings or whatever, because it all counts. But on the other hand, it's also important that you tell us so that we know that she's not just skipping school or whatever. And then she should ally with a good classmate that will tell her what they do in class. In lecture, she would also be able to find the assignments and see, in most cases, what's going on in class. But what the students normally do is that they ally with a good friend in class who sort of shares notes, etc. But online teaching, that's hopefully a thing of the past.
yeah,
Because it's related to
as
corona
long
and
as,
things.
as long as the assignments are made
Yeah.
on time,
Yeah. Yeah.
even on the vacation,
Yeah.
does it consider in the term grade or they will not consider?
Assignments will count, but of course, but also term grades are not just based on 2 weeks in December. They will be based on a longer period, the period from November and until January. So they will have more things to give on. But again, I can't help saying that that's then one of the consequences of being absent. So maybe she will drop a grade there, but because it doesn't count in sort of the big exam, then she'll pick it up again next time. Because there are consequences of not being in school.
Yeah, I think I have an international, we are having an international family outside Denmark, and
I must say that I don't think I've ever seen a student who had to go home on a longer Christmas holiday having drops in grades. It's not an issue that we've had, it's not a problem that we've had really. Because the students who do have to go home, they're quite conscious that they need to keep up the work. So it's not, in my experience, this isn't a problem.
yeah, I will talk afterwards
Yeah.
with you
Yeah.
about our dates.
Yeah, you can just send me a message in an email, and I'll put it in the system that she'll be done those.
Yeah.
So just do that, that'll be fine. And that goes for all of you. If you know that there are periods where you will have to go. I have a pre-IB student right now who's in India, and that makes good sense. So she just wrote me an email and said I have to go because of this and that, and we put it in the system. Of course, it counts, but we knew. So in that sense, we're not worried about her. Someone else had a question?
Yeah, about the illnesses.
Yeah,
How it counts.
it counts also. Everything counts. But this is also where it's important that, as Ivan showed, once in lecture, they had this fravers, or say reason for absence, that they state there why they're absent, if they are ill or if they've gone to the dentist and whatever. If they are ill for let's say a week or so, usually they actually write to me or to Ivan, and because they usually get worried themselves when they've been sick for 3 or 4 days. So
We have a slide that explains this.
do we? Okay, well, can we come back to it then? Yeah. So that was månedskalender and how you find it. On something but we'll get back to the illness.
Maybe we could also skip to the absence stuff and then do that now since we are talking about it. Retention, yeah, there you go. Yeah, we talk about retention because we want to keep students in school. And this is the word that we try to use. When we were in school, we used to talk about absence, and that you had a certain amount, a certain percentage. If you kept yourself under that, then you were home free. And this is not the case anymore. Now we try to look at individual cases for different absences and for different reasons for not being in school. But, well, it's all about well-being, and it's all about coming to school, but sometimes they need a little bit more of a push to go to school. And this is when we come into the picture. So I do attendance consultations, and I look at the statistics, I look at how well they're attending or not attending, and if I think that I need a further explanation, I may call them in for an interview, but it could also be that they've just had an operation, and of course they've written to me and given me all the documentation that I need, and then I don't have to call them in for other than to say, I can see that you're back, are you okay, are you following the classes and things like that, just kind of having a check-in. So, on the other hand, if a student is gone for a week, and I don't hear anything, I'll schedule a meeting. I may even write an email to you and say we haven't seen this student. But if it's a question of them not feeling well for other reasons, then I'd say, well, maybe you should talk to Karen, who is a student counselor, and she'll talk about their well-being, and maybe even say that, well, perhaps you need to talk to our school psychiatrist, our therapist, psychologist, yeah. But the policy is, of course, that you have to do all classes, all mock exams, and other activities. You have to hand in all the assignments on time. If you don't hand in your assignments on time, you will receive written absence. That's the 2 columns I showed you. Students are always strongly advised to state the reason, like we said. There is unfortunately a drop in the drop-down menu, one that says private reasons or private forhold. Then I may call you in if you have too many of those. And most students are really good at filling it out, so that there is a starting point for that conversation. But there is just a certain amount of undocumented absence that we can tolerate as a school. And this is when, yes, as I said, inform us. Prolonged illness, we may have to ask you for a doctor's note or documentation. If there is no documentation for that absence, for whatever reason, we cannot as a school support a student being a student here if they're not active students and are not participating in day-to-day school activities. And in this case, this year, we're actually full. So this also means that they take, if there's students here but not active, they're actively taking a place where we would have taken another student who's much more active. So as a school, it's an obligation on our behalf to make sure that we have students who are active who go to school. If they receive SU, this may also be a problem, that they get a student grant to go here but are not coming to school. So this is all where you can say that's what we talked about, the different columns, and you can see the notes here. This is where we have a serious talk, perhaps first. You can also see where people have been absent here, but basically this is the path that you want to look at if you're concerned with your kid and their absence. But this is kind of the slope that they may be going down if there is a problem and we can't really do anything about. We start with absence consultations, and if this doesn't help, if the attendance does not improve, then they will get a oral warning, may get an oral warning, because sometimes it can be so, in very few cases, it can be so bad that they just disappear for 2-3 weeks. And then we can proceed to a written warning if they do not respond to anything, and then we end up with expulsion. But if they have not been, if there is no improvement, and this process can take a very short time, I'm talking less than a month, and then it can take several months, because it depends, when people go up and down, and sometimes it helps, and then the main point here is the more you tell us about what's going on, the more we can do and talk to the student and try to support the student as well as we can. And between the two of us plus our school therapist. So there is a system here that we follow. Usually I look at periods of about 3 weeks. These are the ones that I kind of try to check in every now and again. Of course, we both look at absence at least a few times a week just to have an idea of where are our students. And if we can see, okay, this student, even though it's not within that 3-week period, and we have a good inkling about a student who is not doing very well, and teachers are really good at coming to us and saying, we haven't seen this student for a couple of classes, is there something going on? So we have a fairly good idea of where our students are, so we monitor them a lot of the time. So we don't want to end here. We don't even want to end here, but they can be called in for a talk just because they've missed 3 or 4 classes, but if it's the same subject, then there's an alarm bell going on, and we call them in and out. Your math teacher misses you. Why are you not in math? Oh, it's because I have driving lessons. Okay, that's a problem, but at least you don't hate math. So, and then it could be anything else. So, are there any other questions about absence?
How many absences are allowed?
I'm not going to answer that. That's exactly the point. There is no upper or lower limit, because a student may have certain needs that dictate maybe an absence of 10, 11, 12%, while other students will not tolerate 4%, because we can see that there is no reason for that specific absence. So that is why we are not setting a bar here.
Yeah.
But I'd say within the period of 3 weeks, if they've missed a day in total, then I'll have a chat with them. Then I'll call them in for a conversation and say, you've missed a class here and there, or you've missed the whole day and you haven't written anything. So it depends. Because we don't want to punish them. We want to keep them in school. So, and for our generation, there was a limit. It said, I think it was 10% for me.
15 for me. I was very good at being at 14.
Yeah. So we have this limit, then students start to speculate.
Okay.
And we want to avoid that. It's an individual student who has individual needs for attendance and attention. So that's how we do it. But a good question.
But I think students, our daughter especially, she's ill now, but she was very worried because last week, it was 2 days, she was ill, and she was focused. 5% I have this Friday, it's, I said, but you are ill. Yeah, but 5%, I said, but you are ill.
Yeah.
So then always encourage them to write to us, because then they will get a message from Eva or me, whoever they write to, say, okay, focus on getting well, and then come back to school when you're well, and don't worry, they would get that message. So if you hear them say that, then ask them to get in contact with us. Because of course we'll support that they stay at home if they're ill.
Yeah. So that's what it's there for. Obviously, health problems. That's the most valid excuse you have for family problems, or something like that. But students are kids, and they sometimes like to take time for
For
themselves.
example, if they miss today, they have to go in the system and write to you.
Yeah.
Every class, the system works in a way that for every class they miss, they have the option of stating a reason.
Yeah.
But I'm expecting that. We expect them to use this system actively. If they're not in one specific class, then they can write and they can say, well, I was late, or the bus was late. Or they can say, my grandmother died, so I had to go to the funeral. So that we can see it.
And for most cases, that's just enough. And then sometimes if they are really worried and really need to tell us what's going on, then they can write to us. But in most cases, if you're ill 1 day or 2 days, just fill in the absence reason, and then that's fine.
Yeah. So it's life, right?
Yes.
They have all kinds of stuff, and then it can be, if they're ill, they're ill. And sometimes I've sent kids home because they show up and, I don't want to get absence. Like, okay, but you want to, contaminate the whole class with whatever germs are circling around. So common sense, obviously. Now to something a little bit more interesting than absence. We want our students to learn outside the classroom as well. So focusing on our TOK classes, we arrange a study trip to Berlin, and most of the kids in IB1 have actually already said that they want to go. A lot of the stuff we do there is, or all of the stuff that we do there, we have about 2 excursions a day. We use later in TOK classes to discuss all kinds of things that they experience. We are going, I've just written with our travel agent, the dates are from 16th of April, that's a Sunday, and then we're back on the following Friday, which is the 21st of April. And we're going by bus, and for the amount that, you might have seen the message because we said share with your parents, right? The price at the moment, with the fuel prices going up, we don't know, it may change a little bit, but for around 31 to 3,300 krona, we get everything. So this means that accommodation, breakfast, all the excursions, and dinner on the last evening. So the only thing that they have to pay for while they're there is lunch and dinner, except for the last evening. So this is a really good, and Berlin is a great city in that way because it's really, really cheap compared to other capitals in Europe, and it takes half a day to get there. So that's why we're going there, and we've been doing it for many years. Value for money is great to take them just outside the classroom. Some people who are here whose kids didn't get to go because of Corona, so maybe second time around will be a lucky chance. Okay. Any questions concerning this? There'll be more information. There'll be also more info on what we're going to do, what excursions we're going to do, and things like that. And your kids will get this information. So if they're not sharing anything with you, it's because they haven't received it. Yeah. Any questions?
What is the last payment, for example, to the street?
We are counting on, because the travel agent should get back to me by the beginning of next week, which means that the deposit has to be paid at the end of the month. We try to place it so it's close to when people get paid, so around October 1st. But that will be just the deposit. And then the rest of the amount is usually due about 60 days before we have to go. So sometimes I negotiate with the travel agent that we put it close to when people get paid. So we're talking in February, something like that. So yeah, I think it was in the welcome letter as well. We can kind of try and plan it out. I hope it won't go higher than 3,300, but let's see. They'll come back soon. We'll have an idea.
And we give the money to our kids or something?
No? Oh, good question, yeah. All of this information, we do not want to have anything to do with cash. So it's a bank transfer. Now we had an account that we used for this, but now it's going to be transferred to the school. So the school accountant will be in charge of all the money. So you transfer the money to them, and then they're all in charge of that. So we really do not want to take cash. And the rules for that have been really tightened up because of all the money laundering laws that have been tightened. So. Yep.
Yeah, because in this welcome letter it is about those calculators.
Yes, I'll say more about that.
No, not about the mobile pay. Is the same will be account.
Oh, for the trade? No, it's going to be it's because of the new. To make a long story short, the school is in the process of making separate accounts for each class for full transparency to avoid all this. Because I used to have my own private account that I only used for that purpose, and my bank told me we don't want to have anything to do with that anymore. So please, because it's 130,000, 150,000 krona that goes through this every year. So apparently, I could have loaned a bunch of money. Know about but now it's the school's job. Yeah. I think this is.
We don't have that many slides left. All the stuff about IB grades and all this, you can actually go to the school's webpage and you can read about assessment and exams. In this little folder that you can all take one of, it was also sent to you with the welcome letter. You can also read a bit about assessment and when it takes place. But here you can actually see how IB grades are sort of given and when, etc. We use the IB grading scale, where 7 is the highest grade and 1 is a very poor grade. And if you get a 1 on your IB diploma, you fail the whole thing. Those of you who know the Danish scale, but that will also be relevant if they apply for further education, this is sort of an IB 7 is a 12 on the Danish scale, a 6 is a 10, a 5 and a 4 is a 7, a 3 is a 2. So it means that IB doesn't say anything about passing grades. They have another way of looking at whether you pass an IB or not, unless you have a 1. But if you are in the Danish sense, and that if you're applying for Danish further education and they want you to have passed a certain subject, then you must have 3, because a Danish 2 is passing. We actually already talked about this, that they had these internal assessments and that they had the written mock exams in all their subjects, not necessarily all the papers, but all the subjects. And that they have written mock exams in mid-IB2, usually in December. And then they have written exams in all their subjects over 3 weeks, 2 to 3 papers in each subject. Those who come from IGCSE system, you know how that works and how it goes. We train that with mock exams. If you come from a Danish system, that's a lot. I don't know about other international systems, but in a Danish system, this is a very not Danish way of doing it. But they get used to it with the mock exam, so that's how it's done. They don't get the results until July the 6th. But as you may have seen, because we're always in the media, that when we celebrate the first graduates of the year in May, because that's when they finish their exams. And if we waited until July 6th, then they will all have gone on holiday and whatever. So we do it in May. That's also why we call it end of exam celebration, because we don't really know these results. They have a pretty good idea about it, but of course they don't know the specific results. But since in Denmark, I don't really have a slide on it, but in Denmark you can get your IB diploma either as it equivalates a Danish studenter exam, STX, or one that equivalates a Danish HF exam. An exam that doesn't give access to quite the same thing as the STX exam, but does give access to a lot of interesting stuff. So that's why we also say that the kids do leave with something. It might not be what they had thought they wanted to leave with, but in most cases they have something that they can go straight into further education with. And yeah. There's a lot of talk about that, and I'll talk the students through that when we get there. If they want a deadline for an IA, EA, these things, then they always have to write to even. They can't just go to the teacher and say, my computer broke down, or my cat died, or we usually joke a little bit about it, viruses on computers. They seem to be popping out, and food poisoning is also very popular. The day before, so be careful what you serve to your kids when they have IAs, because apparently they get food poisoning very often.
We also do count family members who tend to die close to their lives. So. Not a joke.
No. The thing is, they will have, so it's not because we like running around policing them, but it's because they have other deadlines. So if we say to them, well, that's fine, just wait a week or 2, then there'll be a new one. So it will affect, before we make these very, very sort of strict rules about this, that's many years ago, but that we had students who did all their IAs in the winter break because they hadn't done them. Which of course had an impact on the quality if you have to do 10 IAs in a winter break. So it's a way of saying we organize this, and sometimes depending on the subjects, there might be 2 IAs, you come close to each other, and that's just the name of the game. But then there will be other periods of time where you have extra time to do something else. But we don't want them to have extensions because it will affect the results.
But again, the workload, like Karen said earlier as well, is mostly in IB2. They don't start turning anything important in the exam components until the spring semester starts.
Yeah. Again, in this one, you can read about the values and policies. We have the academic integrity policy. If you cheat in an IB assignment that is handed in, then you fail your IB diploma. Good story. But of course, sometimes students do not know that they are cheating. So it's something that we need to talk about and teach them how to do this in the right way in terms of referencing and citing. That's definitely a journey, it's a process. They know something from the schools that they were in before, but we're building on it constantly. And if they handed in an extended essay now, they wouldn't simply be able to do it according to the right rules because they haven't learned yet. So that's something we're building on. Language policy, extremely important. Language of instruction is English. And we say that they must speak English always here to include and not to exclude. Because if we have groups right now, it's not that much in your kids' groups, but we have sometimes Danish students who sort of go together and speak Danish all the time. Some of them come from international schools where apparently it was okay to go around speaking Danish, but it isn't here. I have said to some kids who come from an international school in this town this year, that they chose to go to an international school also after school, after where they were. So it actually, they sort of bought in on the idea that now we speak English. Because it doesn't exclude people who can't also socially as such. So right now I'm thinking Danish is our biggest problem, that people speak Danish. They find it awkward sometimes to walk around speaking English when they're among Danes. But what if someone came up and actually wanted to talk to them, but couldn't because they don't understand what is going on? Attendance policy, we talked about that. Rules of conduct, that's sort of the general sort of bullying policy, how we are among each other, what we can do, that you can't show up drunk, for instance, for sports day, etc. And those go under rules of conduct. Some schools in town, there's a tradition that the kids get really, really drunk the night before sports day. But as Ola, our head of school, wrote to them, you are supposed to consider sports day as a thing where you can drive to school yourself and you can drive from school yourself. That's also what we expect you to do. And they will be excluded from a number of parties, and the sanctions are very, very hard if they do that. Yeah, these are just some of the things that we've sort of said to kids, but perhaps this thing about bring a laptop and a similar device, and bring a charger, because our IT technician says a lot of kids bring a laptop fine, but they run out of battery in the middle of the day, and come to him and ask for the chargers. And they can't take out their phone in class unless the teacher says so. And as you know, the IB, may know that IB exams in the end, they're currently written by hand, but they use a laptop on various occasions and also for the written exam from IAs, etc. So they need them. But we also hear students saying, but my math book is so heavy and my biology book is so heavy, so I don't have room in my bag for my laptop. That's not an excuse. IB1 teachers have actually pointed out that they know that everyone has a laptop, but when they come to classes, 1/3 might not have brought the laptop to class. They are expected to bring those laptops to class.
How about the laptop? It has to be Windows or Mac?
No. As long as they can use Office 365, because they use, for instance, OneNote in English classes for a logbook, etc. But they get a lot of guidance in terms of IT and what they are doing. We had a number of sessions with teachers and IT technicians, making sure they do all this. But MacBook, whatever, we don't have. I think we talked about all of this.
How about the iPad is okay? iPad.
As long as they can write on it and share whatever it is. I think personally, when I've seen students having iPads, it makes them slower compared to those who have a laptop.
But as long as they can access the 365 apps on them, then that's fine, because sometimes they're not able to use the apps properly with depends on the mark, but yeah, a laptop is better.
Yeah, it's perfect. Yeah, just I skipped the slide with the staff. I think we talked about all of that. School within the school. We are 160 IB students in a school of 870 students. We are sort of the little brother, but our students are getting better and better at finding their way into all the school activities that goes on here, the musical, the volleyball team, etc. In terms of language policy, we also have the policy that because they've chosen to be in an international school, they sometimes have to speak English. On the other hand, they've also chosen an international school that is part of a Danish school, so they will also be exposed to Danish. So they will be invited to go to morning assemblies where most of the stuff will be going on in Danish, and then it's sort of the obligation of those who speak Danish to translate to those who don't speak Danish. And they all do have Danish, so by the end of IB2, they will actually understand a lot of what is going on. And yes, the musical is in Danish, but we have a lot of students who also participate, even if they don't speak Danish, because then they play in the band or they help making costumes and whatever. And that's where the students are good at helping each other, also from the other department. And so we really encourage the students to integrate and do a lot of the stuff. We also have our own IB traditions. We have the theory of knowledge challenge for both IB1, IB2, and pre-IB. We have Shakespeare coming in November. Kieran Jones comes and does some a Shakespeare workshop with the students. So we do various things also that we do as such. They also have tutors, actually some of them classmates, who did something sort of a little extra to help them settle in the beginning. And we put them all in body groups also here as an introduction. So if you saw their classroom, you would see that it was full of tables for 4 in squares. And they are in English and in theory of knowledge and in history. They're always sitting in those groups, unless there's a special reason for mixing. That was the tutors' ideas, that they had that in pre-IB and they thought it worked well as a way of integrating new students. And that's at least the feedback I get from the teachers, but also some of the new students I've talked to, is that, okay, it might sometimes be nice if I could sit somewhere else, but on the other hand, I know where I'm sitting. And they get to, they didn't choose their body groups themselves, teachers have done it, so they get to talk to people whom they might not talk to after all. We just made new body groups and we're going to sort of release them all to ordinary self-chosen seating in some weeks, but right now we're having at least one round of body groups now. Few final practicalities, calculators. Some of your kids have bought calculators through the schools. They were ordered on Monday. There's a little delay in the delivery, but when the calculators come to school, the kids will be told and they go to the IT department to get them. If they haven't bought from school, then this is really kind of beginning to become the last chance to buy them elsewhere. You can Google what it is you need, and there are various places where you can buy it. They cannot enter an IB exam room without that calculator, and it takes time to get to know it. There are things they can't do in IB if they don't have that calculator. So those 925 kroners or 1,000 kroners or whatever you can find them for, that's simply one of the things that they do need to invest in when they're here. But they're on their way. Ida mentioned the idea of unattended work sometimes because what they do in class is so specialized. So we can't just, if even as a TOK teacher is ill, We can't just put in another teacher sort of to babysit them. Then it might make more sense and even do unattended work with them so that they might answer some questions, etc. Instead of just getting time off. Sometimes the lesson will also just be cancelled because that makes sense. And this is where we have this idea of hors norm, an annual amount of hours which they are supposed to have in a class. So for instance, they are supposed to have 100 lessons in math, and if many classes are cancelled, then we have management staff who checks those numbers and then they fill in extra over the year. But it also might mean that by the end of the school year, if they've had 100 lessons and there are still some lessons in the schedule, we always schedule too many, then there might be cancellation because teachers are only paid to teach 100 lessons. It might be nice to give them more, but we're publicly funded, so we don't really have that possibility. They borrow the books, but do take good care of them. An IB book costs around 600, 700 kroners. According to Danish law, they can't smoke anywhere in school time, during school time.
You can't use tobacco products.
Yeah. And that means if they go to Netto, they can't do it either. So that's just simply against Danish law. And of course, alcohol is not allowed during school days, but as we talked about before, it does happen at school parties. Very important, if you change your address or phone number or email, as students do, we do not get automatic information from Borger Service or wherever authorities that normally would give that to other institutions. So they need to give it to us themselves, so we need that. There's also something, Corona, I don't know why, but Corona is, actually it has come up because we have had students who has had Corona. But as you know, this is just an ordinary illness now, like a flu. So they don't need to tell us that they have it, and they should just get well and come back to school. As if they had a flu or an influenza. There's nothing in it anymore.
If a kid is sick and having fever and all, and not come to the school because he or she will spread more thing, how does it treat it? Like it is treated as a sick leave or something?
But as we said, all absences count, and that's why it's important that you state under fraværsårsag. When Corona was the big thing, then it was given as an excuse. If you had Corona, then that absence was removed, but that's no longer the case. So it's just like any other flu or any other disease. That's the rule in all over the Danish society. We've made a prefect cleaning up system for the students, and it seems to be working pretty well in IB1. They are actually tidying up, and the younger peers could learn something from them. But they are putting up their chairs and all that stuff, so that's nice. You must have brought them up well. I expect that they do the same thing at home, don't they? Even I have the IB office up here. We run around and do various different things. So that's office. If you come to school, you might not find anyone. Or if you want to talk to me, it's very likely that you will get Anna, Bendo, or Anita, one of the secretaries, and they will just say, either write me an email or they will take your number and I'll call you back as soon as I can. Of course, if I'm in the office, I'll take the call, but very likely I'm probably talking to a student or teaching or doing something else, but I will call you as soon as I get the chance. But just give them a message and they will pass it on to me if it is. Because the front office, you can always find people there. Student handbook, if you have questions about where do I find stuff that's been forgotten at school, etc. It's a handy place to look for things relating to school. Last slide, questions. If you have questions, then again, write to me, call me, and do whatever. my card is over there. There are also some other things over there. This is a folder that's actually only in Danish, but it's one that Aalborg Kommune has made, and if you need something similar in English, I can find some. But this is a pretty interesting thing about what it's like to be a parent to someone who is doing youth education. There are a few copies over there, but you can also find them on the school's webpage. In terms of, is my daughter getting a depression, or is it just sort of ordinary symptoms of being a teenager, where sometimes life goes a little up and down? But what's the line between going just up and down as an ordinary teenager, or actually something that we should take seriously? So this is a good one. I also put a few of these ones. If your kids begin to think about leaving you and living on their own, it happens actually, even though we might not like the idea. Then Aalborg has a lot of student housing facilities where you can sign up for the different categories, also in terms of prices for that. So that's another good thing. There's a little note here from Studievalg Line about guidance and what she does as well. So those are there if you want to take some of them. When my youngest, who's actually now a pre-IB student, had his first, when I was at his first parent meeting, they talked about this circle where 1/3 was a student, and 1/3 was a parent, and 1/3 was the school. Your third is reduced quite significantly, I think, or at least they would like it to be reduced. But don't think that you're not important, or that your support, or that you're asking questions about what did you learn in school today, or whatever. They might not give you a very something interesting, or they might say yes or no, or whatever. But the fact that you ask is still important. In my office, when I talk to students, it might start out with being about math or English or something school related, but very often it ends up about being about stuff that isn't working at home, or can I live up to my parents' ideas about who I should be, or whatever. So you are still important. They're just showing it in a different way. So yeah, and again, the more we communicate, the more we can help each other to support them, the more we can help them get through these years. School is tough. IB life is tough. But being a teenager is also tough, so there's a lot on their plate these years. These are tough years. My mom used to say, I look forward, that she was always looking forward to when we turned around 25, because then she knew that we'd survived education and teenage years and whatever. And sometimes I think she was quite right in terms of that, because so many things are going on, and they don't always have the filter to understand that this might be a little thing, or we might consider it a little thing, but it might be a big thing. Yeah. So, yeah, but I think that's about all for today. But thank you for listening and for coming along. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.